What would you do if a little girl picked up the phone, called you daddy, and turned your carefully built life upside down with just one word? Jack Callahan had built an empire out of nothing but grit, brilliance, and zero tolerance for failure. From a modest apartment in Brooklyn to a glass-walled office on the 47th floor overlooking Manhattan, Jack was the kind of man who didn't just demand excellence, he expected it. So when his assistant, Clara Reynolds, informed him that a senior-level job applicant had missed her interview without even calling to cancel, his temper ignited. "Unacceptable," Jack growled, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk. His salt-and-pepper hair was immaculately combed, but the sharp lines around his eyes deepened with fury. "She didn't call," he snapped. Clara stood at the door, calm despite the storm she knew too well. 15 years in his shadow had trained her for moments like this. "No call, no email," she said evenly. But her references were glowing. "Her name is Ava Carter," Jack scoffed. "If she can't bother to show up, her references mean nothing." He picked up the resume, tossed it aside, and ran a hand through his hair. At 45, Jack had no family, no friends worth naming, and a reputation as a brilliant but ruthless man. People feared him more than they admired him. "I want her number," he said flatly. Clara blinked. "Sir? I want to tell her personally that this level of unprofessionalism has no place in New York." "Jack," Clara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Is that really necessary?" He didn't even look up. "The number, Clara." With a resigned sigh, she handed him Ava's contact information. Jack dialed immediately, already rehearsing the scathing speech he'd perfected over decades in boardrooms. But when the line connected, he didn't hear a woman's voice. He heard a child. "Hello?" a small voice chirped. Jack blinked. "I'm trying to reach Ava Carter." "Mommy's in the bathroom," the girl replied cheerfully. "She's crying." Something in Jack's chest tightened. Is she okay?" he asked, his voice involuntarily softening. "She's sad because she missed the important meeting," the child explained matter-of-factly. "We didn't have any food, and she had to go to the food bank before it closed. She said the job would fix everything." The oxygen seemed to vanish from the room. Jack had stared down billion-dollar mergers with icy calm. But this left him speechless. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Emily," the girl answered. "I'm 6. A pause. "Are you the important man Mommy was supposed to meet? She has your picture on her computer." Jack frowned. "Yes. I'm Jack Callahan." There was a small gasp on the line. "You're the man in Mommy's special folder," Emily said. "She has papers with your name and a picture of you at the beach. Mommy says, you're my daddy." The floor beneath Jack seemed to tilt. What did you say?" he whispered. "Are you really my daddy?" Emily asked, her voice suddenly hopeful. "Mommy says I have your eyes." Jack's hand shook. He reached for his chair but missed, collapsing to his knees on the plush carpet. That's not possible," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I can't have children." "I was told." The bathroom door creaked open in the background. "Emily?" came a startled woman's voice. "Who are you talking to?" "It's my daddy, Mommy." "He called us!" There was a gasp, the sound of the phone dropping. Then a new voice took over tight with panic and disbelief. "Mr. Callahan, 2 can explain everything." But Jack couldn't respond. His world had just shattered. And for the first time in years, he was crying. After the call, Jack sat in stunned silence. The New York skyline glittered behind him, but he no longer saw it. He saw a beach 7 years ago, a tech conference in San Diego, a woman named Ava. A brilliant developer he'd shared one unforgettable weekend with before returning to Manhattan. She'd tried contacting him afterward, but Clara, following Jack's standard post-entanglement protocol, had blocked every message. Now here he was, 7 years, a missed interview, and one phone call later, facing a truth he'd never imagined. He had a daughter. Jack turned back to his computer and opened Ava Carter's resume again, scanned her LinkedIn, clicked through public social media profiles, and there among photos of donated laptops, code snippets, and what looked like night classes was a little girl with steel blue eyes. His eyes, and the same dimple on the left cheek. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then clenched into fists. "Call the car!" he barked into the intercom. "Now!" Within minutes, Jack's black SUV was weaving through Manhattan traffic, headed north toward a crumbling apartment complex in the Bronx. He stared out the window, his mind spiraling. How many birthdays had he missed? First steps, bedtime stories? Did Emily cry when she scraped her knee? Did she like dinosaurs or dolls? Was she safe? Outside the apartment building, Jack froze at the buzzer marked Unit 4B. He wasn't a man who knocked. He commanded. But today, he reached for the button with trembling fingers. What would he say? What could he possibly say? He was about to meet the daughter he never knew existed, and perhaps the woman he'd never truly forgotten. The fourth-floor hallway smelled like old paint and desperation. Jack Callahan, billionaire CEO of Callahan Technologies, stood outside apartment 4, his hand raised, frozen inches from the door. What am I doing here? The man who once negotiated a multi-billion-dollar merger while flying 30,000 feet in the air couldn't bring himself to knock. Then, as if the universe decided for him, the door creaked open. A tenant exited, holding 2 bags of groceries and nodding politely. Jack caught the door before it shut and stepped inside. His polished shoes echoed on the scuffed stairwell as he climbed. No elevator, no concierge. No glass atrium, just peeling paint, flickering lights, and the thudding of his own heartbeat. He reached 4B and knocked once, firmly. Footsteps approached. Then, silence. A chain rattled. The door cracked open just enough to reveal a woman's cautious eyes. Recognition flared. "Mr. Callahan?" she whispered. "Hi, Ava," Jack replied, voice unsteady for the first time in years. "We need to talk." The chain slid loose. Ava Carter opened the door fully, revealing the same striking face from his memory older now, with tired eyes and fine lines etched by time and struggle. Behind her, a small girl peeked out from behind a chair. Blue eyes. Dimpled cheek. Jack couldn't look away. "Are you really my daddy?" Emily asked quietly. Jack, the man who controlled boardrooms with a glance, found himself speechless. Inside, the apartment was small but tidy. A laptop sat on a second-hand table, surrounded by programming books. The kitchen counter held a single box of cereal. A drawing was taped to the refrigerator, a child's sketch of 3 people, labeled Me, Mom and Dad, in NY, complete with crown and dollar signs. Ava motioned to the sofa. "You should sit." This isn't a conversation to have standing, but Jack remained on his feet. "Is she mine?" he asked, straight to the point. Ava met his gaze, unapologetic. "Yes, that's impossible. I was told I couldn't." "Medical facts can be wrong," she cut in, her voice calm but fierce. "You never let me explain." "I tried for months. Your assistant blocked my calls, my emails." "Everything." Jack paced the living room, every breath heavier than the last. "I need a DNA test," he said. "Fine," Ava replied. "I've got nothing to hide. I never asked you for anything, Jack. We managed on our own." His eyes swept the modest space. Clearly, the words came out colder than intended. Ava's jaw tightened. "We don't need your judgment." "Emily asked about you, so I told her the truth, that her father was successful but not in our lives. I never said a bad word about you." Jack's gaze landed on the fridge again, the drawing. The figure labeled Dad wore a crown. Something cracked open inside him. The next morning, Jack arranged for a private paternity test at a nearby clinic. Ava and Emily came with him. The nurse took swabs. No tears, just tension. Jack offered to drive them home. Ava refused politely. At his penthouse later that night, Jack couldn't sleep. His mind raced with images. Emily's smile, her laugh, her question, "Are you really my daddy?" The test results arrived in less than 48 hours. Jack's lawyer, Logan Pierce, called first. "It's confirmed," Logan said simply. 99.998% probability. Emily Callahan is your daughter. Jack didn't speak. "You okay?" Logan asked. Jack sank into his leather chair, staring at nothing. "How is this possible? Medical error? Or maybe a miracle," Logan said. "Either way, she's yours." So what now? What now? Jack had built an empire through decisive action, every decision backed by logic and data. But this wasn't a merger or product launch. This was life. This was his daughter. 2 days later, he sat across from Ava in a quiet cafe near her apartment. Emily was at school. "The test confirmed it," he said. Ava nodded. "I never doubted it. I want to be part of her life," Jack continued, surprising himself with the words. "Just like that?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "You'll sweep in after 6 years and play daddy?" "I missed 6 years I can never get back," he admitted, "but I don't want to miss any more." Ava studied him, skepticism and hope battling across her face. "This isn't a business acquisition, Jack," she said. "You can't just decide you want her and take over. Emily has a routine, a life, feelings." "I understand that." "Do you?" she challenged. The Jack Callahan I remember wasn't exactly known for emotional intelligence. The comment stung, because it was true. "I'm not that man anymore. We'll see." Later that week, Jack met Emily again, this time at a playground near her school. She ran to him, arms flailing, smile wide. "Hi, Max." He still wasn't daddy, not yet. But he was something. They played for an hour. Swings. Slides. Laughter. At one point, she called him Monkey, and he laughed so hard he forgot to check his phone. Ava watched from a nearby bench, arms crossed but not cold. There was something in her eyes, a shift. Maybe. That night, Jack returned to his penthouse and did something he hadn't done in decades. He opened an old photo album. His mother's eyes stared back at him from a faded portrait. Emily had those eyes. So did he. He poured a glass of scotch but didn't drink it. He didn't need it. Not tonight. Jack Callahan was a man who could command a room with a glance. He had closed billion-dollar deals over steak dinners, rewritten corporate contracts on private jets, and dismissed entire teams with a single email. But nothing, not even the most ruthless boardroom, had prepared him for sitting on a tiny park bench beside a 6-year-old girl eating a popsicle. His daughter, Emily. "So," she said seriously, legs swinging, "what's your favorite animal?" Jack blinked. He hadn't expected the question. Eagles," he answered. "They're fast, smart, strong." Emily nodded approvingly. "I like turtles. They're slow, but they never give up." That answer struck him harder than any shareholder complaint ever could. It had been a week since the paternity test confirmed what Emily already believed with her whole heart, that Jack was her daddy. But Jack, he was still catching up. He wasn't used to this. The tiny backpack, the endless questions, the need for presence instead of performance. Yet, something about this small human with his eyes and her mother's quiet fire had begun to chip away at the armor he wore so well. Ava had set boundaries. Strict ones. No sleepovers, no showing up unannounced, no press. No gifts that screamed guilt. Emily had routines, and Jack was a guest in her world, not the architect. He had agreed, with surprising humility. Twice a week, he picked Emily up from her after-school program. They'd go to the park or a quiet cafe. She loved grilled cheese and raspberry lemonade. Jack took black coffee, always had, but he started adding honey after she wrinkled her nose at how grown-up bitter it was. At first, their conversations were awkward. Jack, usually so articulate, found himself stuttering around a kindergartner. "Do you know how to braid hair?" she asked one day. He laughed nervously. "Not really." "I can teach you," she said matter-of-factly. "Mommy says everyone can learn if they care enough." That night, he watched 3 YouTube tutorials and practiced on a throw pillow. The more time they spent together, the more Jack realized how much he'd missed. Not just milestones, first steps, first words, birthdays. He had missed Emily. Her bad jokes, her love of math, her habit of naming every squirrel in the park. She was funny, too. One afternoon, she asked if he had a pet. "No," Jack replied. "My building doesn't allow them." "You should move," she said bluntly. "No one should live where puppies aren't allowed." He nearly choked on his coffee. Every visit, Jack came prepared with questions, activities, books. But it was Emily who taught him how to be present. She didn't care about his resume, his reputation, or the Forbes list. She cared that he listened, that he was on time, that he remembered her favorite color, purple, and knew which Harry Potter house she belonged to, Ravenclaw. He started keeping notes on his phone, things she said, things she liked, things he wanted to ask her next time. It wasn't work. It was joy. But with joy came guilt. Each time Emily laughed, Jack felt a twist in his chest. Where had he been when she had the flu? Who held her hand after her first scraped knee? How many bedtime stories had Ava told alone? He saw it all now in Ava's tired eyes, in the way she watched him with cautious grace. One night, after dropping Emily off, he lingered. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything. For raising her." Ava looked at him for a long moment. "I didn't do it expecting thanks," she said. "I did it because she's mine," Jack nodded. "She's ours." Ava didn't correct him. Emily began drawing again, something Ava said she hadn't done in a while. One picture showed the 3 of them. Ava with her hair in a bun, Jack in a suit, and Emily in the middle holding both their hands. Above them, she had written, "My family," with the I dotted with a purple heart. Jack kept the drawing in his briefcase. Not for show, for strength. There were missteps, of course. Like the time Jack bought her a limited edition Science Kit 2 Advanced, too flashy. Emily had said thank you, but her eyes hadn't sparkled. Later, Ava gently reminded him, "She doesn't need to be impressed, Jack. She needs to be understood." So Jack asked Emily what she wanted next time. Her answer? "Can we go to the library together?" "I like when people read to me." So he did, every week, and he gave each character a ridiculous voice, even when it embarrassed him in public. Especially when it embarrassed him. One Saturday, Jack took Emily to a small museum. They stared at ancient fossils and meteorites. She clung to his hand the whole time. Halfway through, she tugged his sleeve. "Do other kids have dads who work in big buildings too?" "Some do," Jack said carefully. "But do their dads work too much like you used to?" Jack blinked. "Yeah, maybe. I'm glad you don't anymore." She smiled up at him. And for a moment, Jack Callahan's, defined by power and wealth, felt like the richest man alive. Later that night, in his empty penthouse, Jack stood before a blank wall. He took down the abstract painting that once cost more than Ava's annual income. In its place, he hung Emily's drawing. It wasn't framed in gold. The edges were uneven. There were crayon smudges on the corner. But to Jack, it was perfect. It started with a phone call. Jack Callahan was in a board meeting, half listening as a regional manager explained quarterly losses in Singapore. He'd already marked the slide deck for revision when his phone, his private line, vibrated on the table. "Ava." He excused himself without explanation, ignoring the startled looks from his executives. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Ava?" Her voice trembled. "Jack, it's Emily. She collapsed at school. I'm at Mount Sinai Children's. They're running tests." For a moment, Jack couldn't speak. I'm on my way, he said, already heading for the elevator. The hospital was a blur of white walls and antiseptic air. Jack barely registered the security protocols or the receptionist's clipboard. He simply said, "My daughter is here," and the words felt both foreign and sacred on his tongue. A nurse led him through the emergency wing, where he found Ava standing beside a curtain-drawn bed. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed red. "She fainted," she whispered before he could speak. They couldn't wake her for almost 10 minutes. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he pulled back the curtain. Emily lay small and still in the hospital bed, wires snaking from her arms, monitors blinking steadily. "Hey, monkey," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "I'm here." She didn't stir. A doctor arrived moments later, Dr. Grace Howard, pediatric nephrologist. "We've done initial scans," she said, glancing at her tablet. "There are signs of kidney function abnormalities. We're running more tests, but we're concerned about a genetic condition." Jack frowned. "A what?" Dr. Howard explained slowly, gently. "We suspect something called Alport syndrome. It affects the kidneys and can be hereditary." Ava's knees buckled slightly, and Jack steadied her. "I thought I couldn't have children," he muttered, confused. Dr. Howard looked up. "You were told that?" Jack nodded. "At 14? After complications from mumps?" "I was told I was sterile." She tapped something into her chart. "That kind of complication reduces fertility, but complete sterility is rare and unrelated to Alport syndrome." "So, if it's genetic," Ava said softly, "you think it came from Jack?" Dr. Howard hesitated. "It's possible. We'll need family medical history from both sides." Jack nodded absently, his gaze fixed on Emily's unmoving form. That night, Jack stayed in the hospital. He refused to leave, moving between Ava's side and Emily's bed like a man possessed. The machines beeped, the fluorescent lights buzzed. But the only sound Jack truly heard was the tiny, uneven breathing of the little girl who had changed his life. This wasn't a failed product launch. This wasn't a lost investor. This was his child, and he couldn't fix it with money. He felt helpless for the first time in decades. The next morning, Dr. Howard returned with the results. Emily's kidneys are deteriorating faster than expected. "We'll need to begin treatment immediately." "What kind of treatment?" Jack asked. "Dialysis," she said gently. "And eventually, a transplant." The word hit like a bullet. Ava's hand flew to her mouth. Jack simply whispered, "A transplant?" Dr. Howard nodded. "We'll begin the donor search soon. A family member would be ideal. Both of you will be tested." Jack's world narrowed to a single thought. "Give her mine." "Take mine. Take whatever she needs." They tested both parents the next day. Ava went first, then Jack. He clenched his jaw as the nurse drew his blood, the sterile band around his arm cutting into his skin. "Please let me be a match," he thought. "Please let me be useful. Just once, in the way that matters." In the waiting room, Ava broke the silence. "She's scared, Jack." "I am too." A beat passed. "She wants to come home." "Not the apartment, your home. She said it feels safer." Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. "I'll have a nurse-certified suite ready." "She can stay as long as she needs." Ava raised an eyebrow. "She's not a guest, Jack. She's your daughter." He nodded. "I know, I still don't feel worthy of saying it out loud." Ava's expression softened. "She already thinks you hung the moon." Jack smiled faintly. "That's because she doesn't know my mistakes. She knows your heart." That evening, back at the hospital, Emily finally opened her eyes. Jack was sitting beside her bed, half asleep in a plastic chair. "Max?" she whispered, voice raspy. He jerked awake. "I'm here, monkey. I'm right here." "Are we going to the park today?" His heart cracked. "Not today, sweetheart. You need rest." She frowned. "But you promised we'd go down the big slide." "I know." And we will, as soon as you're strong again. Promise? He took her tiny hand in his. I promise. She nodded, satisfied, and drifted back to sleep. Later that night, alone in his penthouse, Jack stared at the skyline. For the first time in his life, the city felt cold and distant. The silence was deafening. He looked down at his phone, opened the contact labeled Logan Pierce, legal. He called. I need to rewrite my will, he said. Everything. It all goes to Emily. Logan didn't argue, just asked for the details. Jack outlined a trust for her education, medical care, future independence. Then he hung up and walked into the lavender-painted bedroom he'd prepared for her weeks ago. The stuffed rabbit still sat on the bed. He picked it up and clutched it to his chest. Tomorrow, he'd bring it to her. Tomorrow, he'd find out if he could save her. And if he couldn't, he'd still never leave her side again. Jack Callahan had faced some of the hardest truths life could offer. He had discovered he was a father to a 6-year-old girl he never knew existed. He had watched that same child collapse in a classroom. He had sat beside her hospital bed as doctors used words like Allport syndrome, transplant, and genetic disorder. But none of that prepared him for the truth he was about to uncover. Because this time, the lie had started long before Emily. It had started with his own father. It began with a nagging thought. Jack couldn't shake it. I was told I couldn't have children, but I did. And not just any child, one who carried a genetic condition. That meant something had to be inherited. And that pointed back to him. Jack had always accepted what he'd been told at 14, that the mumps he'd caught as a teenager had rendered him sterile. The specialist's words had been clinical, definitive, and final. So he never questioned it. Until now. 2 days after Emily's diagnosis, Jack sat across from Logan Pierce, his longtime attorney. I need to find out the truth, he said, about my medical history. Logan leaned back. You think the doctors were wrong? I think someone lied to me, Jack said darkly. Why would they? Jack didn't hesitate. Because my father didn't want me distracted. He didn't want me having a family. He wanted me chained to Callahan techno ties, no vulnerabilities. Logan was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll find a private investigator. One who specializes in medical forensics. Within a week, the investigator had what Jack needed. A folder. Thin, unassuming. But inside was everything. Original, unaltered medical records, old letters, insurance logs. A signed check from Richard Callahan. Jack's father made out to the very specialist who had diagnosed Jack as infertile. The memo line read, Confidential consultation. Jack stared at it for a long time, his hands trembling. He paid them to lie to me, he whispered. Logan nodded grimly. It looks that way. Jack flipped through the documents. There, in clinical black and white, was the truth. Jack had not been sterile. His reproductive system had been affected, yes, but nowhere near the extent he had been told. And tucked inside one envelope was a secondary diagnosis that had never been disclosed to Jack at all. Possible signs of hereditary nephritis. Jack froze. That's Allport syndrome, he murmured. Logan looked at him sharply. You didn't just pass it on, Jack said, voice cracking. I have it too. That night, Jack sat alone in his penthouse, Emily's medical binder spread across the table, his own childhood files next to it. 2 sets of lives, 2 battles with the same hidden enemy. But now, there was hope, because maybe, just maybe, this connection made him the perfect donor. He called Ava the next morning. I need to speak to Dr. Howard, he said, privately. An hour later, Jack stood in the hospital hallway with Dr. Grace Howard, holding the folder of evidence in his hands. She scanned the documents carefully. This changes everything, she said slowly. Your previous incompatibility could have been due to incomplete typing. If you carry similar markers to Emily, your tissue match might be far higher than average. Jack nodded. Run the tests. Today, please. Dr. Howard smiled softly. You might just be the answer we've been looking for. When Jack told Ava what he'd discovered, her hand flew to her mouth. Your father lied to you. All this time? Jack nodded. He thought love was a liability. That family made a man weak. Ava blinked back emotion. And now? Jack looked toward Emily's room. Now I know he was wrong. She's the only strength that matters. The new test results came back 2 days later. Dr. Howard delivered the news in person. You're a match, she said, smiling for the first time in weeks. In fact, you're an ideal match. Jack exhaled like he hadn't in days. Ava covered her face with both hands, overcome. I want to move forward with the surgery, Jack said immediately. No delays. Dr. Howard held up a hand. We'll schedule the pre-op evaluations, but I want you to understand the risks to you and to Emily. Jack didn't flinch. If it saves her, it's worth it. That evening, Jack brought Emily a small gift. A stuffed rabbit just like the one she always slept with, but in a little white doctor's coat. She beamed. Is this me? Kind of, Jack smiled. But this one's also part superhero. Emily giggled. Like you? Jack's smile faltered, then returned. I hope so. As Emily drifted off to sleep, Ava and Jack sat together in the corner of the hospital room. He told her everything. About the investigator, the bribe, the diagnosis he never knew he had, and finally, the choice he was ready to make. I'm not just her father by blood, he said quietly. I want to be her father in every way that matters, even if it means giving her a part of me I'll never get back. Ava looked at him for a long, silent moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. The snow had fallen quietly overnight, blanketing the city in white. But inside Mount Sinai Children's Hospital, everything was moving at full speed. Nurses bustled from room to room. Monitors beeped. IV bags were changed. And in room 412, Jack Callahan stood at the window, watching the sunrise with the weight of the world pressing on his chest. Today was the day, the transplant. He turned to look at Emily, curled up under her lavender blanket, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in her arms. She looked so small, so fragile, and yet she was the bravest person he knew. Max! Came a sleepy voice. He was at her side in an instant. Hey, monkey. Is it today? She asked, eyes wide. He nodded. It is. She reached for his hand. Are you scared? Jack hesitated, then smiled softly. A little. Are you? She nodded, then whispered. But Mommy says being scared means you're about to do something really brave. He kissed her forehead. Your mom is very wise. An hour later, the surgical team arrived. Dr. Grace Howard stood beside Jack as they prepped him. Vitals look good, she said, scanning her tablet. You ready? Jack looked toward Emily's bed. She waved at him with both hands, grinning despite the IV lines. He swallowed hard. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Ava walked with him to the edge of the OR wing. You don't have to say anything, he said, reading her expression. But she shook her head. I do. She placed a hand gently on his chest. Thank you for giving her this chance. For being here. Jack looked at her for a long time. I wasn't there when she was born, he said quietly. I missed her first words, her first steps. I don't get those moments back. He placed a small envelope in her hand. What is this? My updated will. Everything's in there. For Emily, for you. Jack, I need to know you're both protected, just in case. She didn't argue. Just nodded, eyes glistening. Then, without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him. "Come back to us," she whispered. "I will," he promised. The transplant took nearly 6 hours, 2 surgical teams, 2 operating rooms, a father and a daughter, connected not by paperwork, but by blood, by sacrifice, by love. When Jack woke, everything was blurry. But one voice cut through. "He's waking up." Dr. Howard stood beside him, smiling. "Everything went well. Your kidney is functioning beautifully in Emily." He exhaled in relief. "And her vitals," he rasped. "Stable. She's still sleeping. You'll see her tomorrow." He nodded slowly, eyes closing again, not from pain, but from peace. The next afternoon, Jack was wheeled into Emily's room. She was awake barely, but when she saw him, her whole face lit up. "Max," she said weakly. "You did it," he chuckled. "We did it." She held up her stuffed rabbit. "I gave her your name." "Oh yeah? Her name's Maxine now." "She's got your kidney too." Jack laughed, then winced, still sore from surgery. Ava stood nearby, arms crossed gently, but she was smiling. The real kind. The kind that said, "We made it." Later that evening, as Jack dozed off in the chair beside Emily's bed, she reached for his hand one more time. "Hey, Max? Yeah, monkey? When we get better, can we go to the park?" He squeezed her hand gently. "Yeah, we'll race to the swings." "And this time," she said seriously, "I'll push you." Jack smiled. Deal. 6 weeks had passed since the transplant. Spring was blooming across the city, early tulips in Central Park, birds on windowsills. But inside Jack Callahan's penthouse, the change was something deeper, quieter, and more personal. Emily's laughter echoed down the hallway as she zoomed past on her scooter, her energy returning faster than anyone had dared to hope. Her cheeks were full again. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and mischief. Her favorite phrase was, "Let me show you something." And Jack, he let her, every time. Ava watched from the kitchen, leaning on the counter, arms crossed, a gentle smile on her face. "You spoil her," she said, not accusing, just observing. Jack grinned. "Isn't that the job of a father? I thought you didn't believe in jobs you can't measure." "I do now." The arrangement had started as temporary. After the surgery, Ava and Emily had moved into one of the guest suites so that Emily could recover under close supervision. Jack had offered it as a practical solution. Closer to doctors, less disruption, more convenience. But convenience had turned into routine. And routine into something that felt suspiciously like family. Every morning, Jack made pancakes, burned a few, perfected a few more. Ava brewed the coffee. Emily set the table, always putting the napkin with purple hearts at Jack's seat. They shared meals, stories, quiet evenings. Jack started showing up less at the office, more at home. He found himself reading bedtime stories in silly voices, Googling how to braid hair, and asking questions like, "Does this dress code apply to dads at the school concert?" Ava found herself asking him for help without thinking twice, and slowly, carefully, she let him in. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Jack and Ava sat on the terrace. The city buzzed beneath them, but here, it felt still. "I forgot how loud this place can be," Ava said, sipping her tea. Jack looked at her. "I forgot how quiet my life used to be." They didn't say anything for a while. Then Ava turned to him. "This wasn't the plan." Jack nodded. "No, but maybe the plan was never the right one." She looked at him then, really looked, seeing not the billionaire CEO, but the man who had memorized every one of their daughter's medications, who had missed board meetings to learn how to make homemade mac and cheese, who had held Emily's hand through every blood draw and post-op appointment. "What is this, Jack?" she asked softly. "What are we doing?" He hesitated. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I know I don't want it to end." Ava didn't reply. But she didn't get up either. The next day, Jack came home with a surprise. A framed photo of the three of them, taken during a rare warm afternoon in the park. Emily sat on his shoulders, Ava laughing beside them, the sun flaring just right in the background. He hung it on the wall of the living room, above the couch. Emily noticed it immediately.
"Look, Mom, that's us." Ava blinked, her voice quiet. "Yeah, baby."
That's us. Jack stood back, looking at the picture. He'd once filled these walls with art worth more than most people's homes. Now, one little girl's drawing on the fridge and a single photo on the wall made this place feel more like home than ever before. Later that night, Emily poked her head into Jack's room. "Can I sleep in here tonight?" Jack smiled. "Of course, monkey." She crawled in beside him, clutching her rabbit. "Did you know you snore?" she said matter-of-factly. "I do not." "Yes, you do." "It's okay. Mommy says sometimes grown-ups make noise when they've been brave." Jack laughed softly. "Then I must have been very brave." She nodded, her eyelids already fluttering. "You're the bravest dad I know." The email arrived at 7:03 a.m. Ava Carter stood at the kitchen counter in her robe, pouring cereal for Emily, when the subject line caught her eye. "Congratulations, you've been accepted." She blinked. Her hands trembled slightly as she tapped the screen. The message was short, but the words lit up something inside her that had been dim for years. "Dear Ava, we're thrilled to offer you admission to the Horizon Code Bootcamp's spring cohort. You were one of 12 applicants selected from over 400 nationwide." She covered her mouth, breath catching. Emily peeked up from her cereal. "Mom, are you okay?" Ava smiled through glassy eyes. "I'm more than okay, baby." By the time Jack emerged from his room in his usual crisp button-down, Ava was pacing. "You look like you just launched a product that broke the internet," he joked. She turned to him, glowing. "I got in." Jack's eyebrows lifted. "The coding program." She nodded, laughing in disbelief. "The one I told you about months ago." "It's full-time, 12 weeks, project-based." "It could change everything." "That's amazing," Jack said, genuinely happy for her. "You deserve this." "But," she added, her voice faltering, "it also means I'd have to quit my current job, and childcare, and the schedule is brutal." She didn't need to finish. Jack could see the weight return to her face. That evening, they talked on the terrace. Emily had gone to bed early after a full day at school and an impromptu art project that now decorated half the fridge. Ava sat cross-legged on the cushioned bench, the letter still open on her phone. "I want this, Jack, but I don't know if I can afford to want it." Jack didn't hesitate. "Let me help." Ava turned. "Jack, just during the program," he said gently. "I'll cover expenses, Emily's care, anything you need." "Not as charity, as an investment, in you." "In her." "I don't want to feel like I owe you," she said softly. "You don't," he replied. "You've already given me more than I ever thought I could have." The next day, Jack worked remotely from home. He took Emily to school, packed her lunch, answered conference calls with her glittery stickers still on his laptop. Later that afternoon, as they built a cardboard rocket ship in the living room, Emily looked up and said, "You're really good at this." "At building rocket ships?" "No, at being a dad." Jack paused. No deal, no merger, no headline had ever meant more. That night, Ava stood at his office door. "I've decided," she said. He looked up. "I'm going to do the program." Jack smiled. "Good. And I'm going to let you help." He set down his pen. "But only under one condition," she added, crossing her arms with a playful smirk. "Name it. I cook dinner on Sundays. You do dishes." Jack stood, walked over, and extended his hand. "Deal." But instead of shaking, Ava pulled him into a hug, not out of gratitude, but because she wanted to. The next morning, Emily bounced down the hallway with a backpack almost bigger than she was. She passed the framed photo of the three of them on the wall, as she always did. But this time she paused. "Hey, Max." "Yeah? Why don't we take a new picture soon?" Jack crouched beside her. "Why?" "Because we're different now." He smiled. "Yeah. I guess we are." It was a warm Saturday in June, the kind of day New Yorkers lived for after long grey winters. Families filled the park, kites flew high, and laughter floated through the air like music. Jack Callahan sat on a bench near the playground, watching Emily fly across the monkey bars like a daredevil. Ava sat beside him, sipping iced tea, sunglasses tucked into her curls, her laughter mingling with the summer breeze. They looked like any other family. And in that moment, Jack realized this wasn't a chapter. This was the life he wanted to live. Emily jumped off the last bar and ran toward them. "Guess what?" she said, out of breath. "I went all the way across without falling." "You're basically an Olympian," Ava grinned. Emily beamed, then added with a giggle, "Mom says you used to be scared of playgrounds." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Did she now?" "I said you wore suits to the sandbox," Ava corrected, laughing. "Well," Jack shrugged, "I've since learned that juice boxes pair well with mergers." They laughed together, the kind of deep, easy laughter that only comes when healing has done its work. Later, as the afternoon light softened into gold, Emily ran off to play tag with a new friend. Jack and Ava strolled a quiet path lined with blooming dogwoods. Jack paused under the shade of a large tree. He turned to her. "There's something I've been meaning to say." Ava stopped, sensing the shift in his voice. Jack took a breath. "I spent most of my life building something I thought would make me whole. The company, the money, the reputation. But it wasn't until I met her and found you again that I realized everything I ever wanted was never behind a boardroom door." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ava's breath caught. Jack went down on one knee. "I'm not asking for perfect. I'm not asking for the past to vanish. I'm asking for a future one that we build together, as a family." He opened the box. A simple, elegant diamond ring sparkled inside. "Ava Carter," he said, voice steady. "Will you marry me?" Before Ava could answer, a familiar voice rang out from the jungle gym. "Say yes, Mom!" They both turned to see Emily standing on the highest platform, hands cupped around her mouth, grinning ear to ear. The entire park seemed to freeze. Parents turned, kids giggled, one old man clapped softly. Ava laughed through her tears. Jack, still on one knee, smiled up at her. "I guess we have an audience," he murmured. Ava nodded, wiping her eyes. Then she whispered, "Yes." Applause broke out around them as Jack slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into an embrace. Emily ran into their arms seconds later, wrapping herself around both of them like she never wanted to let go. "We're going to be a real family now," she cried. Jack kissed the top of her head. "We already were." That night, back at the penthouse, the three of them curled up on the couch under a shared blanket. Emily had insisted on a movie night, complete with popcorn, apple slices, and a list of rules. No talking during the movie, except to laugh. As the credits rolled, she yawned and leaned into Jack's side. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "this was the best day ever." He looked down at her, heart full. "Me too, monkey," he whispered. "Me too." 1 year later, Jack Callahan stood barefoot in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. Pancakes! The man who once had a private chef and couldn't tell flour from baking soda now had a weekend tradition with his daughter. Banana pancakes with exactly 5 chocolate chips per piece. "Dad!" Emily called from the living room. "You're burning the edges again." "Creative caramelization," Jack shouted back, laughing. Ava appeared behind him, sliding her arms around his waist. "Let me guess, batch one goes to the squirrels?" Jack mock gasped. "How dare you question the culinary genius of this household?" She reached for the plate. "Because I live with you." Their mornings had changed. So had their lives. After the weddings mall, simple, in the park where he proposed they'd stayed in the penthouse, but turned it into a home. Not a showroom. Not a monument to status, a real home. Emily's art covered the fridge and half the hallway. Ava's books lined the living room shelves. Jack's framed tech awards were now in the study, next to drawings of rocket ships and friendship bracelets made of yarn. The old world had been precise, polished, impressive. But this one was alive. Emily had recovered beautifully. Her doctors called her a miracle in motion. She called herself part robot, part superhero. She joined the school's advanced math program, built her own website, emilyexplainsstuff.com, and insisted her parents attend every science fair, whether she was competing or not. And Jackons, a man who didn't know the names of his own department heads, never missed a single school play, recital, or even parent-teacher night. He chose to be there, over and over again. Ava had finished the coding boot camp and now led a small team at Callahan Technologies, building educational software for public schools. She still kept her old laptop on her desk as a reminder, scratched, outdated, but full of dreams she once thought were out of reach. And Jack? He stepped down as CEO. He still served as chairman, but he let go of the day-to-day control. Not because he was tired, but because he'd finally learned how to live. That summer, they took their first real vacation together. A beach in Maine, no press, no laptops. Just sandcastles, board games, and one unforgettable moment when Emily screamed, "This is better than Disney World!" though she later admitted Disney was still pretty great. One night, as they sat around a fire pit in their backyard, Emily curled up between them, her eyes half closed. "Hey," she mumbled, "remember when you didn't know you were my daddy?" Jack smiled. "How could I forget? I'm glad you called." Ava kissed her forehead. "Me too," Emily yawned. "Best wrong number ever." They laughed, and Jack looked at Ava, the woman who had raised their daughter with strength and grace, and felt something he'd spent his entire life chasing finally settle in his chest. Peace. He once thought success was a number. Now he knew better. Success was Sunday morning pancakes, school pickup lines, holding hands during hard news. Reading bedtime stories, even if you had to do the voices. Success was showing up. Not just once, but always. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep, Jack and Ava stood on the terrace, wrapped in a shared blanket. The city sparkled below, but it no longer pulled at him the way it used to. "I thought I had everything," he said quietly. "You did," Ava replied. "You just didn't know what mattered yet." He looked at her, then back toward the bedroom where their daughter slept peacefully. "Well," he said, "I know now." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and for a long time they just stood there, together, exactly where they were meant to be. Life has a way of circling back to what truly matters. This story isn't just about a CEO finding a daughter he never knew. It's a reminder that success means little without someone to come home to. In chasing titles, wealth, and control, many lose sight of the quiet miracles like a child's laugh, a second chance, or the courage to say, "I'm sorry." For older Americans who've lived through seasons of loss, change, and reflection, Jack's journey speaks deeply. It tells us that healing is always possible, no matter how late it seems. That one phone call, one act of grace, can change everything. And most importantly, that family is not built by blood alone, but by presence, sacrifice, and love lived daily. As we age, we're not just counting time, we're weighing meaning. This story gently invites us to mend what's broken, forgive ourselves, and lean into the life we still have left. Because sometimes the most meaningful chapters begin when we finally let go of who we were and embrace who we're becoming.